Welcome to Hidden Wounds. My name is Arthur Winston, and at 62 years old, I have come to understand that the most profound betrayals are not inflicted by enemies or strangers. They are delivered by the very children you brought into this world, the ones you nurtured with your own life's work and sacrifice. I was still moving with the deliberate caution of a man fresh from knee surgery, the ache a constant reminder of my body's limitations, when I uncovered the full extent of my son's deceit. The fog of the anesthesia had only recently lifted, and I was leaning on my sturdy oak walking cane for support when I found the documents tucked away in a drawer in his old childhood bedroom. My lake house, the sanctuary Eleanor and I had poured 20 years of savings and dreams into, was no longer mine. It had been sold. The signature on the deed transfer was a convincing imitation of my own, but it was a forgery. I knew with chilling certainty that I had never put my pen to those pages. That morning, my son Nicholas strolled into the kitchen, whistling a cheerful tune as if he didn't have a single care, the gold of his wedding band flashing in the morning light that filtered through the linen curtains. At 38, he still carried himself with an air of unearned confidence, a swagger I now realize I should have disciplined out of him years ago. "Morning, Dad," he said, his eyes not meeting mine as he helped himself to coffee from my favorite ceramic pot. "How's the knee feeling?" I held up the paperwork, my hands surprisingly steady despite the inferno of rage building within my chest. "Perhaps you can explain this, Nicholas." His expression didn't shift. There was no flicker of shame, no hint of remorse, only that unnerving cold calculation I had started to see in him more and more. "Ah, you found those. You forged my name." "I did what was necessary," he stated, sitting down at the table across from me. He stirred his coffee with an unnerving casualness, as if we were merely discussing the weather. "Isabella and I needed the funds for our honeymoon. We went to the Maldives overwater bungalow, private chef, the whole experience. It was magnificent." The dismissive way he spoke, as if the culmination of my life's work was nothing more than trivial pocket money for his lavish getaway, caused something inside me to harden, something unyielding and permanent. "That house was everything to your mother and me," I said, my voice low and controlled. Nicholas just shrugged. "Mom's gone, Dad, and if we're being honest, you're not getting any younger. You might as well just sign over this house to me while you're at it. It would make everything simpler for everyone involved." I stared at my son, this man I had raised, guided through sickness, bailed out of trouble, and celebrated in his triumphs. This man who had just effectively told me my life was almost over, and that I should expedite his inheritance for his own convenience. A slow smile spread across my face. It was the kind of smile that would have made Eleanor brace for a storm, but Nicholas never possessed his mother's sharp intuition. "Of course, my boy," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "Whatever you believe is best." He looked genuinely taken aback by my easy capitulation. The poor, foolish boy. He had no grasp of the reality of the situation. I wasn't surrendering. I was just beginning my offensive. That very afternoon, while Nicholas was at the office, managing the construction business Eleanor and I had built from the ground up, I made a series of critical phone calls. My first was to my longtime attorney, the second to my accountant, and the third was to a highly recommended and discreet private investigator my friends at the golf club had mentioned. By the time evening fell, I had a strategy in place. It wasn't just a simple plan. It was a meticulously crafted masterpiece of retribution, designed to strip him of everything he held dear, piece by painful piece, just as he had done to me. You see, Nicholas operated under the delusion that he was dealing with a frail, aging man. What he failed to comprehend was that age hadn't softened me. It had honed my resolve to a razor's edge. I had 62 years of accumulated experience, connections, and wisdom. He had 38 years of arrogance and foolishness. This was never going to be a fair contest. That first night after discovering Nicholas's treachery, I sat in Eleanor's favorite armchair, surrounded by photo albums that chronicled the life we had built together. The house suddenly felt alien, like the scene of a crime where I was both the victim and the lead investigator. Eleanor and I had constructed this life from sheer will and effort. We started with nothing but our love for each other and a shared determination, living in a tiny apartment above a bakery. She learned the trade of carpentry during the day, and I would spend my nights poring over the books, managing every penny. Every dollar we earned was cherished. Every choice we made was weighed with immense care. I vividly remember the day we bought our first home, a dilapidated house that most people considered a lost cause. But Eleanor saw its hidden potential. She spent 2 years restoring it, room by room, while I handled the wiring and plumbing, transforming that wreck into a beautiful home. The profit from selling that house allowed us to buy 2 more properties to renovate. 20 years of that cycle, and we were the proud owners of 5 properties and a construction company that provided livelihoods for 37 families. Eleanor never lost sight of our humble beginnings. She always respected the value of hard work and careful planning. And then there was Nicholas. I showered him with the fruits of our labor, believing I was giving him a better life. Private schooling, a fully paid college education, a new car on his 16th birthday, and a management position at the company he never had to earn. I gave him all the things I never had, thinking I was shaping his character. Instead, I had unwittingly cultivated a monster. The warning signs had been there all along. At 12, he stole $40 from my wallet and lied about it without flinching. At 16, he crashed the car I bought him and blamed the other driver, despite a police report that clearly stated otherwise. In college, he accumulated a mountain of credit card debt that I quietly paid off, foolishly believing I was teaching him a lesson in responsibility. Each time I made an excuse for him, cleaned up his messes, or told myself he would mature, Eleanor would try to warn me. "That boy needs to face consequences, Arthur," she'd say. "You can't shield him from reality forever." But I was terrified of losing the affection of my only child, so I enabled his worst tendencies. Now, sitting amidst the ruins of that misguided affection, I finally grasped the truth in Eleanor's words. Some people interpret kindness as a weakness. Nicholas had made that mistake about me for the very last time. The next morning I dressed with purpose. I put on my best tweed jacket, a crisp shirt, and the tie Eleanor had given me for our last anniversary. My hair was neatly combed. If I was marching into battle, I would do so as a general. My first stop was the law firm of Pierce, Stern and Associates, the firm that had managed our estate for over 15 years. Stephen Pierce had been a close friend of mine since our days in the service, and he knew our financial history inside and out. "Arthur," he said, getting up from behind his large mahogany desk, "I was sorry to hear about your surgery. How are you holding up?" "Ready for a fight," I replied, sinking into the plush leather chair opposite him. "But we'll get to that." I laid out the entire sordid story. The forged signature, the stolen lake house, and Nicholas's callous suggestion that I should prepare for my own demise. Stephen's expression grew progressively grim. "That's felony fraud," he said when I finished. "A clear case of forgery. We can have him arrested today." "No," I said, and his eyebrows shot up in surprise. "I want something more instructive than prison. I want to teach him that every action has a consequence, and I want that lesson to follow him for the rest of his life." Stephen leaned back, a newfound respect in his eyes. "What exactly do you have in mind?" I smiled, and there was no warmth in it this time. "I intend to give my dear son precisely what he requested. Sign over the other house, you said." I recited Nicholas's words back to him 3 days later, holding the fresh deed transfer documents Stephen Pierce had meticulously prepared. "Well, son, your old man aims to please." We were in my kitchen once more, a repeat of the earlier scene, but this time the power dynamic had completely shifted. Nicholas's eyes gleamed with avarice as he watched me affix my signature with a deliberate flourish to the legal papers. "I knew you'd come around, Dad," he said, already mentally spending his newfound assets. "This is for the best, really." "Oh, I have no doubt," I murmured, carefully blotting the ink. "This house will be quite the inheritance." What my beloved son was blissfully unaware of was that I had spent the previous 72 hours meticulously transforming his inheritance into a financial minefield. The very house he was so eager to possess was now encumbered by 3 separate substantial mortgages I had secured in quick succession. Each loan was perfectly legal, properly documented, and carried monthly payments that would cripple a small nation. But that was merely the overture. I had also instructed my accountant to look into some curious patterns in the company's financials, uncovering years of Nicholas skimming funds, assuming his old father was too out of touch to notice. Every falsified expense report, every phantom vendor payment, every petty theft was now neatly documented, waiting to be discovered by the appropriate authorities. The private investigator I'd retained had been even more fruitful. It appeared Nicholas's personal life was a tapestry of secrets, secrets that would undoubtedly fascinate his wife, Isabella. "You're doing the right thing, Dad," Nicholas was saying, tucking the signed deed into his expensive jacket as if it were a winning lottery ticket. "Isabella will be so relieved. She's been so worried about our finances." "Has she?" I asked with feigned innocence. How considerate of her to be so concerned. "Well, you know how people can be about security." I almost burst out laughing. If Nicholas wanted to discuss people and security, we could certainly have that conversation. But the timing wasn't right. Not yet. "Will you stay for dinner?" I asked. "I could make that pot roast you always loved as a kid." He glanced at his wrist, at the Rolex I had bought him for his last birthday. "Actually, I've got to meet some clients tonight. Big new project on the horizon." More falsehoods. According to my investigator, Nicholas's client meetings were typically held at a downtown bar, with whichever young woman was receptive to his charms. But I just smiled and nodded, playing the part of the devoted, slightly naive father he imagined me to be. "Of course, son, business is business." After he departed, I sat in Eleanor's chair and savored a moment of pure, unadulterated anticipation. Tomorrow, the first mortgage payment of over $13,000 would be due for a loan Nicholas didn't even know existed. In a week, an anonymous tip would find its way to the IRS regarding some highly creative accounting practices at Winston Construction. And by the end of the month, Isabella would receive a very illuminating package in the mail. I thought of Eleanor, wishing she could be here to witness what was about to unfold. She always said patience was a virtue, but I was about to prove that revenge was an art form. The true elegance of a well-devised plan is in watching it unfold organically, like a time-lapse video of a flower blooming. I didn't need to be loud or dramatic. I simply had to plant the right seeds and allow human nature to do the rest. Isabella was the first fracture in Nicholas's carefully constructed world, and she was a magnificent force of nature. At 34, she was intelligent, ambitious, and far more than my son deserved. I had always admired her, probably more than she knew. It was during Sunday dinner, 2 weeks after the house transfer, that I decided it was time to water those seeds I had planted. "Isabella, my dear," I said, passing her the serving dish. "How are things going at the marketing agency?" "Challenging," she replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "We're up for a major new account, but the client is insisting on seeing our financials first. They want to ensure we're a stable partner." "How prudent of them," I remarked, casting a brief glance at Nicholas. "Financial stability is absolutely crucial in business and in a marriage." Nicholas's fork stopped mid-air. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing at all, son. Just an observation that Isabella is a wise woman to prioritize security." I turned my attention back to my daughter-in-law. "Has Nicholas mentioned his latest real estate ventures to you?" Isabella's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Real estate ventures?" "Oh, yes," I continued, my tone one of casual conversation. "He's become quite the businessman lately, taking on new mortgages, managing properties. Very ambitious." I watched as a flush crept up Nicholas's neck, but he was trapped. He couldn't deny it without revealing the truth about the house he'd stolen, and the one he'd just manipulated me into signing over, both of which were now financial time bombs, ticking away in his name, with the first payments already past due. "I didn't realize you were investing in real estate," Isabella said to her husband, a new, sharper note in her voice, a note of suspicion. "It's just some minor family property matters," Nicholas said dismissively. "Family property worth a considerable amount," I added helpfully. "Such a tremendous responsibility." After dinner, as Nicholas was in the kitchen, Isabella approached me in the living room. "Mr. Winston," she began quietly, "is everything all right between you and Nicholas? You seem different." I took a moment, choosing my words with precision. "I worry about the pressures young couples face. Financial stress, career demands, the temptation to make poor decisions." "What kind of poor decisions?" "Oh, you know," I said with a vague wave of my hand, "the kind that successful, attractive young men sometimes make when they believe their wives will never find out." Isabella became very still. "What are you implying?" "Nothing specific, my dear. Only that a strong marriage is built on trust, and trust requires absolute honesty. I certainly hope Nicholas has been completely honest with you about everything." I left the insinuation hanging in the air between us, as potent as smoke. Isabella was more than intelligent enough to connect the dots, and intelligence, when combined with suspicion, is a powerful catalyst. I knew she would start asking questions. And when a woman like Isabella starts digging into the life of a man like Nicholas, she inevitably finds answers. The eruption occurred exactly 3 weeks later, and it was more dramatic than I could have ever imagined. I was in my workshop, the one Eleanor had helped me build for our 20th anniversary, when I heard the shouting from the house next door. Nicholas and Isabella lived in the colonial I had helped them purchase as a wedding gift, and their angry voices carried clearly across the manicured lawn. "She's 19, Nicholas. 19. I paused my work, a wood plane held motionless above a piece of fine oak. "Isabella, just let me explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been lying to me for 2 years? That you have a daughter? You never told me you had a daughter." Now that was a development. My investigator had hinted at a significant secret, but I hadn't anticipated this particular revelation. It was before we were serious. "She's 19, Nicholas. That means you were with her mother while we were engaged." The argument intensified, and I could hear snippets of phrases. Vegas, DNA test, child support, and my personal favorite, "You pathetic, lying snake." An hour later, I saw Isabella's car tear out of their driveway. 20 minutes after that, my phone rang. "Dad." Nicholas's voice was small and broken, a tone I hadn't heard since he was a boy and had shattered Mr. Henderson's window with a baseball. "Hello, son. How are you this evening?" "Isabella left me," he stammered, the words tumbling out in a confused rush. She found out about Chloe, my daughter, from before." I let the silence hang in the air, forcing him to confront the void his actions had created. "Dad, I messed up. I really messed up." "It certainly sounds that way," I agreed, my voice carefully devoid of emotion. "Can I come over? I need to talk to someone." "Of course, son." He arrived in less than 10 minutes, looking haggard and utterly defeated. This was not the arrogant man who had stolen my property and wished for my death. This was a boy who had finally collided with a consequence he couldn't charm, cheat, or buy his way out of. "Tell me everything," I said, settling into my armchair with a glass of whiskey. The story emerged in fragments. A weekend trip to Las Vegas 2 years prior, a young cocktail waitress, a brief affair that he had foolishly continued, a pregnancy he had tried to pay to make disappear, and a daughter he had been secretly supporting while lying to his wife about unexplained expenses. "Isabella hired a private investigator," he said, his head in his hands. "She found everything. The child support payments, the hotel receipts, even photos of me with Chloe. She's filing for divorce, Dad. She's going to take everything." "How dreadful for you," I said, taking a sip of my drink. He looked up at me then, perhaps detecting the cool detachment in my tone. Aren't you going to lecture me?" "Would it make a difference?" "No, I suppose not." I reached out and patted his hand, the same hand that had forged my signature and stolen my legacy. "Some mistakes, son, are too profound for lectures. Some mistakes simply demand payment. I don't know what I'm going to do. The lawyers, the alimony, the child support for Chloe, on top of everything else." He trailed off, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, calculating the financial devastation of his life. "What do you mean on top of everything else?" "The house payments, Dad. The ones for your old houses. I don't know what happened, but there are all these mortgages and liens, and the payments are astronomical." "I am not a doctor now." I smiled, a wide, genuine smile. "Oh, son, those aren't my houses any longer. Don't you remember? You had me sign them over to you. They are your responsibility now." The color drained from his face as the full weight of his situation finally dawned on him. "Dad, you wanted my property so desperately, Nicholas. Well, now you have it. All of it. Every single debt, every obligation, every single consequence. Isn't it wonderful?" He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Perhaps he was. "You did this to me on purpose." "I gave you exactly what you demanded," I replied calmly. "Nothing more, nothing less." He stood up abruptly, his desperation giving way to anger. "You're my father." "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "And you are my son, the son who stole from me, lied to me, and told me to my face that I should hurry up and die. The son who forged my signature and sold our family's dreams to fund his infidelity. Did you honestly believe there would be no repercussions?" He left without another word, slamming the front door so hard that Eleanor's portrait on the wall rattled. I raised my glass in a silent toast to the empty room. "One down, Eleanor," I whispered. "Many more to go." Divorce proceedings, I discovered, are a masterclass in karma, particularly when you have a front row seat. Isabella's lawyer was a predator in an Armani suit, and she dismantled Nicholas's case with surgical precision. Within 2 months, my former daughter-in-law had secured substantial temporary alimony, primary custody of their 8-year-old son Liam, possession of the house they had shared, and control of half of what was left of Nicholas's business assets. What remained was minimal, thanks to the financial quicksand I had meticulously prepared for him. One crisp October morning, Isabella appeared at my door, looking more radiant than I had seen her in years. "Mr. Winston," she said, "I hope you don't mind me stopping by." "Not at all, my dear. Come in. I'll put on some coffee." We sat in the same kitchen where Nicholas had so blithely written me off, and Isabella spoke of her new life. "I want you to know, Liam will still see his father," she said. "I would never use my son as a pawn." She hesitated, but we both understood the unspoken part. "Even though Nicholas used you as one," I finished for her, "by hiding Chloe's existence, he turned your marriage into a war zone where you were an unwitting combatant." She nodded, her eyes glistening. 2 years, Mr. Winston. For 2 years he looked me in the eye and lied every single day. While I was planning our future, he was paying for his past. And then a brilliant smile transformed her face. "But now, I'm free. Free to build a life based on truth, not deception. Free to find a man who actually deserves me." As if on cue, a car pulled into my driveway. Through the window, I saw a man in a well-tailored suit step out of a Tesla. "That's Evan," Isabella said, a faint blush on her cheeks. Evan Hayes. The name rang a bell. Evan Hayes, Nicholas's former best friend, the man who had built a petroleum consulting empire from a single gas station his grandfather had left him. The one Nicholas had always been consumed with jealousy over. The one whose success had driven my son to ever more desperate measures to project an image of wealth. "Nicholas's old friend?" I asked, feigning surprise. "Former friend," Isabella corrected. "Evan said he cut ties with Nicholas years ago because he couldn't be trusted. Apparently, Nicholas borrowed a significant amount of money and never paid it back, lied about business deals, that kind of behavior." The irony was so rich I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Nicholas's own deceit had not only cost him his wife, but had delivered her directly into the arms of his greatest rival. Evan Hayes was everything Nicholas pretended to be. Genuinely successful, effortlessly charming, and refreshingly honest. When Isabella introduced us, he shook my hand with a firm, respectful grip, not the hollow performance of deference Nicholas had always offered. "Mr. Winston, it's a pleasure. Isabella tells me you were the real genius behind Winston Construction." "My wife built the company," I corrected him. "I just kept the books." "The books Nicholas apparently never bothered to learn," Evan said with a wry smile. "I tried to give him some financial advice once. He told me he didn't need it from someone who just got lucky with oil." "And how is that working out for him?" I inquired. "About as well as you would imagine." 6 months later, a sophisticated cream-colored invitation arrived in the mail. Isabella and Evan were getting married. The ceremony was to be at the city's grandest cathedral, with a reception at the very country club where Nicholas had desperately sought membership but could never afford the dues. I wore my finest suit and watched as Isabella walked down the aisle toward a man who could give her everything Nicholas had only promised. Liam, looking dapper in his small tuxedo, served as the ring-bearer, a genuine smile on his face that I hadn't seen in years. Nicholas, of course, was not present. I'd heard through the grapevine that he was living in a small one-bedroom apartment across town, working as a project manager for a competing construction firm. His descent from business owner to a mere employee had been swift and absolute. During the reception, Evan approached my table. "Mr. Winston, I want to assure you that Liam will always have a home with us, and you will always be welcome." "That's very gracious of you, Evan. Isabella thinks the world of you. She said you were the only family member who treated her with dignity during the divorce." I sipped my champagne, watching the happy couple on the dance floor. "Respect is something that is earned, not inherited." "I couldn't agree more," he said, pausing to study me with his intelligent eyes. "May I ask you something directly?" "Of course. Did you know about Chloe About the financial mess? About all of it? I met his gaze without flinching. I knew my son was a liar and a thief. The rest were just details. He nodded slowly. And the situation with the houses, the mortgages? Are you asking if I set him up? I suppose I am. I smiled. The same cold smile that once served as a warning to Eleanor. Evan, I gave my son exactly what he demanded. Nothing more, nothing less. If he was incapable of managing the responsibilities that came with his demands, that is a failure of his character, not my planning. Evan let out a deep, appreciative laugh. Remind me never to get on your bad side, Mr. Winston. A wise decision, I said. It's no wonder Isabella chose so well the second time. As I watched them dance, Isabella radiant and Liam laughing as Evan spun him around, a complete picture of familial joy, I felt a sense of satisfaction I hadn't experienced in a very long time. The thing about quicksand is that the more you struggle, the faster you sink. By winter, Nicholas was drowning. The first foreclosure notice, intended for him, was mistakenly delivered to my door in January. I thanked the mail carrier for the error. It was addressed to Nicholas Winston at the location of my former lake house, the one he'd stolen to pay for his honeymoon. Apparently, the new owners had discovered severe pre-existing issues with the foundation. Their lawyers were now suing the previous owner for damages, which, according to the forged documents, was Nicholas. I brewed a cup of tea and read the legal complaint with the same relish most people reserve for a good novel. $27,000 in structural repairs, plus legal fees. My phone rang that afternoon. Nicholas's voice was hollow. Dad, I need help. What sort of help, son? Money. They're suing me over the lake house sale. They're claiming fraud for not disclosing the foundation problems. Did you know about the foundation problems? A long silence. No, but they claim I should have known, that it was my responsibility as the seller. Well, you weren't the seller, Nicholas. I was. But since you forged my signature, you assumed all the legal liability. Dad, please, I can't afford this. The mortgage payments on the other house are already bankrupting me. What other house? The one you signed over to me? There are 3 mortgages on it. The payments are almost $8,000 a month. I don't understand how it happened. I could have explained it. I could have detailed the ease of leveraging a property when you have a 40-year history of impeccable credit. But instead, I just said, that does sound like a challenge. I need a loan, Dad. From you. You must have savings. I laughed. A genuine, unrestrained laugh that seemed to crackle over the phone line. Nicholas, you sold my home to pay for a vacation with your mistress. You told me to hurry up and die, and you forged my name to steal from me. And now you want me to finance the cleanup of the mess you made. You're my father, and you are my son. The son who decided I was disposable? You didn't make mistakes, Nicholas. You made choices, criminal choices. And now, you are living with the consequences. So you won't help me? No. He hung up. 2 weeks later, my friend Robert at the golf club mentioned that Nicholas had defaulted on everything. The properties were in foreclosure, and there was talk of criminal fraud charges for the forgery. Aren't you worried about him? Robert asked. Worried? I said thoughtfully. No, I know exactly what's going to happen to him. He's finally going to learn the lesson I should have taught him 30 years ago. That evening, I poured a glass of Eleanor's favorite scotch and raised a toast to her memory. Justice, I whispered to her portrait. Slow, methodical, and inescapable. Detective Mark Jennings of the Lakeview Police Department arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. He was a young man with serious eyes and a methodical demeanor that told me he was good at his job. Mr. Winston, he began, I'd like to ask you some questions about a case of property fraud. I invited him in and served coffee. I assume this is about the lake house, I said. Your son claims you gave him permission to sell it, he said, consulting his notes. But we found some discrepancies. Such as? For starters, hospital records show you were undergoing knee surgery on the date the documents were allegedly signed. I smiled. You're very thorough, Detective. Mr. Winston, did you give your son permission to sell that property? No, I did not. Did you sign the deed transfer? No, I did not. He jotted down my answers. Are you willing to press charges for fraud and forgery? This was the moment. The culmination of my entire plan. With a single word, I could send Nicholas to prison. Detective, I said, what is the likely outcome if I press charges? Given the amount, probably 2 to 5 years in state prison. And what is happening to him currently? He's facing multiple foreclosure proceedings, a civil suit for fraud, and complete financial ruin. His ex-wife's attorney is also looking into how this fraud impacts their divorce settlement. So he is already being punished. I would say so, yes. Prison would be a conclusion. But financial and social ruin? That was a sentence that would last a lifetime. I don't believe I wish to press criminal charges, I said. Are you sure, sir? This is a serious felony. Detective, my son stole things from me that can never be replaced. My trust, my sense of security, my faith in my own family. Prison won't return any of those things. But watching him navigate the consequences of his actions every single day for the rest of his life, that might finally teach him something. The detective looked at me with a new understanding. You're not what I expected. You expected a victim? I smiled that cold smile again. Oh, detective, I am getting justice. Just not the kind that's handed down in a courtroom. After he left, I confirmed with my lawyer that declining to press charges would not affect the civil cases systematically dismantling Nicholas's life. He's made a lot of enemies, Stephen said. The foundation lawsuit alone could bankrupt him. That evening, I saw a familiar car parked across the street. Nicholas sat inside, just staring at the house he grew up in, the house where he had set his life on a course for destruction. He never got out. After 20 minutes, he drove away. I returned to my workshop, humming softly. I was finally giving my son the education he should have received decades ago. The eviction notice was served on a bright May morning. From my kitchen window, I watched as a sheriff's deputy handed the papers to Nicholas on the porch of what had been my second home. My son had lost a significant amount of weight. His expensive suits were gone, replaced by ill-fitting clothes. The arrogant swagger had been replaced by the slumped shoulders of a defeated man. This was his third forced move in 6 months. First the colonial he shared with Isabella, then the apartment he rented, and now this shabby rental. A few days later, I drove by his new residence, a converted garage. The irony was not lost on me. That night, I called him. Dad? His voice was hoarse with surprise. Hello, Nicholas. I heard you moved. A long pause. How are you getting by? I'm managing, he said, but the words lacked conviction. You looked thin the last time I saw you. When did you see me? You were parked outside the house last month. Another long silence. I didn't think you noticed. I notice everything, son. I always have. His voice cracked. Dad, I'm sorry. For everything. The house, the lies, what I said to you. I was arrogant and stupid and now you're sad and broke. I finished. He let out a broken laugh. Yeah, that about sums it up. Do you understand why this happened? Because I'm a terrible person who destroys everything I touch. No, I said firmly. Because you made terrible choices and never learned they have consequences. There is a difference. Is there? I considered his question from my armchair. surrounded by the life Eleanor and I had built on a foundation of honesty. "Yes," I said at last. "A terrible person cannot change, but a person who made terrible choices can learn from them if they are willing to finally accept responsibility." "I accept it. Do you? Or do you just accept that you were caught?" The silence between us was heavy with years of my own failures as a father. "I don't know," he said, and it was the most honest thing he had said to me in years. "That," I told him, "is a start." But I offered no money, no shelter, nothing but the hard truth he had spent a lifetime avoiding. After hanging up, I sat in the dark and thought about justice, mercy, and revenge. And I decided that what I had done wasn't revenge. It was education. 2 years have passed. I am sitting on the deck of my lake house, which I quietly reacquired through a shell corporation after the foreclosure sale. The view is just as I remember it, the sound of the waves just as peaceful. Everything is as it should be. Nicholas still lives in that converted garage. He works as a carpenter, his paychecks garnished for alimony and child support. He has nothing left for the luxuries he once considered his birthright. But he is alive, and he is facing his consequences. That is the only mercy I have given him. Isabella and Evan are thriving. Liam visits his father on supervised weekends. They invited me to their first anniversary, and when Liam hugged me goodnight, he whispered, "Grandpa Arthur, I'm glad Mom is happy now." "So am I, my boy," I told him. "So am I." My private investigator was worth every cent, helping me navigate the legal labyrinth to transfer those debts to Nicholas, all within the bounds of the law. My friends at the golf club say I seem more alive now than I have in years. In a way, they're right. Losing Eleanor made me vulnerable, but fighting back, reclaiming what was mine, and teaching my son that I was not some disposable old man that awakened a strength in me I had forgotten. I am not a doormat. I am not a bank. I am Arthur Winston, and no one gets to take what I have built. This morning, a letter arrived. It was from Chloe, my 19-year-old granddaughter in Vegas. She wants to meet me. I wrote back immediately, inviting her to visit. She is innocent in all of this, and perhaps I can teach her the lessons her father never learned. As I sealed the envelope, I reflected on the chain of events. Nicholas's choices created this new reality, but from the ashes, new things are growing. Chloe will have a grandparent who values integrity. Liam has a stepfather who respects him. Isabella has a husband who cherishes her. And I have my home, my dignity, and the profound satisfaction of knowing that justice, even when delayed, always finds its mark. Tomorrow, I meet with Stephen Pike to update my will. I'm leaving everything to charity scholarships for young entrepreneurs, legal aid for the elderly facing family financial abuse. Nicholas won't receive a dime. My most important legacy to him was the lesson he is now living. Some fathers would die for their children. I chose to live long enough to teach mine that consequences are for a lifetime. The sun is setting over the water. In a house that is mine again, in a life that I rebuilt from betrayal. I raise a glass to Eleanor's photograph beside me. "Justice served, my love," I whisper, with patience, precision, and absolutely no mercy. If this story of resilience and hard-earned justice resonated with you, consider liking this video and subscribing for more. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your power and rewrite your own story, because true strength lies in choosing when, how, and on whose terms you fight life's battles.